when we're looking at total metabolism, right? A significant chunk of that is taken up by RMR, right? That forms the majority of our metabolism.
Biggest piece of the pie, if you will. Yeah, I think we used that analogy once, the pie analogy, and your RMR is like the big wedge of the pie.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've got RMR, we've got non-exercise activity, which can be another big chunk.
Depending on how active you are.
On how active you are, right? And then we've got some effects from digestion and then exercise activity. But exercise activity overall is a pretty small proportion of that.
And most of the tools that we use to measure that, if you're not directly measuring energy expenditure using a metabolic cart. So like our cardio coach, we can measure how many calories somebody's actually burning during their workout, during exercise.
Yeah.
And so if you're not measuring it that way, your estimate is probably quite off. Most of the ways that we calculate that don't factor in that the bump in metabolic rate that we're seeing. You burned 500 calories during this workout. Well, probably 100 of that, or 75 of that was just your resting metabolic rate. So it's not an increase. That's a chunk of that was that. So now we're down to 400, 425. And anyway, a lot of those estimates aren't terribly accurate.
Well, and can be wildly inaccurate depending on the device. So they've done a lot of studies looking at different fitness trackers, kind of spanning the gamut of all of the different types of devices. And they found that they're, some studies found anywhere from like 25% all the way up to like 90-ish% inaccurate in other devices. And so the energy expenditure based on your device isn't always the most accurate. And so like you said, testing with a metabolic cart, like the cardio coach, and then finding out what's my exercise expenditure at different heart rates. Then I can tie it to my heart rate. And so when I'm exercising with a heart rate monitor, I have a much better idea of what's the amount of calories I'm burning during this exercise.